Hey guys, tonight we step aboard a creaking wooden ship, drifting through salty Atlantic fog, somewhere off the coast of what will one day be Virginia. You can smell the wet rope, the tar, and the fish bones shoved into barrels. You can hear the slow groan of wood against wood, the gulls shrieking overhead, and beneath that a silence. It's the kind of silence that sinks into your chest and doesn't leave. You're on a Dutch privateer called the White Lion, and you're not here by choice. This is August 1619. The weather is hot and miserable, the kind of humid that makes every breath feel like a slow drowning. Below deck, 24 Angolans captured in West Africa and torn from a brutal Portuguese slave ship are chained, starving, and barely alive. And you're one of them. You don't know it yet, but your forced landing at Point Comfort, Virginia, will later be marked as the beginning of African slavery in what will become the United States. Except, it's not the beginning, not really. And what happens next doesn't exactly look like what you've been taught in school. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off that ship shackled, starving, but standing. The English colonists at Jamestown, scraggly and half-starved themselves, don't exactly roll out a red carpet, but they do want labor. Desperately. Their tobacco dreams are bigger than their workforce, and indentured Englishmen keep dying of swamp fever and poor decisions. Here's the twist. When you're sold off that Dutch ship, it isn't technically as a slave, not in the way we'd recognize today. Slavery, at this point in Virginia, isn't fully written into law. There's no official legal framework that says people like you will remain in bondage for life. In fact, the first Africans are listed as servants, just like poor white Europeans who signed contracts for 4 to 7 years of labor in exchange for a vague promise of land and freedom. So you get handed to a tobacco planter, work the fields under the same scorching sun, eat the same wormy bread, maybe even share a hut with a disillusioned English orphan. You both wake up sore, both sleep covered in mosquito bites, and both dream of the day you'll be free. That's the official line. Anyway, but here's what actually happens. White indentured servants finish their term and go free, often bitter, but breathing. You, on the other hand, never seem to reach the end of your contract. The rules start shifting mid-game. Your servitude stretches from 7 years to life. That little loophole, it quietly sets a terrifying precedent. Historians still argue whether those first Africans in 1619 were true slaves or long-term indentured servants. The records are vague. Some did eventually earn their freedom. One man named Anthony Johnson even went on to own land and servants himself. A rare exception, but the door was already closing. Still, back in this moment, you're focused on survival. You harvest tobacco leaves that make your fingers bleed and your lungs ache. You learn English fast because not understanding it gets you whipped, or worse. You start picking up on the customs, the rhythm of colonial life, and the petty squabbles of your white overseers. And believe it or not, you start seeing slivers of humanity. One white servant sneaks you extra food. Another teaches you a song, which you twist into your own language. There are small rebellions here, not with pitchforks, but with laughter, eye contact, and shared misery. A quirky fact, the early English colonists were obsessed with sweat. They believed Africans had a different kind of body odor that made them better suited for labor in hot climates. Yes, they turned BO into a justification for racialized slavery. Stay fragrant, my dude. Meanwhile, religion begins to swirl around you. The Anglican Church is trying to convert everyone, but baptism doesn't protect you from bondage. At this point, there's a frantic theological debate brewing. If an African is baptized, can they still be enslaved? Some preachers say no. Others, conveniently, say yes be, because it's for their soul. You're probably thinking, wow, what a comforting logic. And yeah, no, you're not getting a break here. You notice something else, too. Not everyone in Virginia is on board with slavery yet. Some colonists express doubt. Others point out the obvious, that Africans weren't legally enslaved under English common law. But nobody is exactly rushing to put that into practice. The colony is hungry, desperate, and fragile. Tobacco is king, and you're just another pair of hands keeping the kingdom alive. What you don't know, trudging home from the fields under a rust-orange sunset, is that this legal gray area won't last much longer. The colony is drafting new laws, quietly, carefully, piece by piece. They're building the blueprint for chattel slavery on soon. There will be no confusion about your place in it. But for now, you sleep on a dirt floor, wondering if freedom is coming in 5 years, 10, or never. You share stories with your fellow captives in Kimbandu, some in Portuguese, some in broken English. You recreate home in gestures, in recipes, in remembered prayers, and above you, the stars spin slowly in a sky that feels like it's watching. You wake up to the sound of wind scratching at the door of your wooden hut. If you can call it a door, it's more like a plank balanced badly across an opening. Your back aches, your wrists are sore, and your stomach growls with a familiar emptiness. You shuffle into the grey dawn, not knowing that today is when it finally hits you. You're not going home. Not this year. Not ever. You've heard your name spoken less and less. To your master, you're the African, or my Negro, or worse. You've noticed that when white servants finish their time, they vanish into the hills with maybe a pig, a rusty gun, and a land deed. You, though, you've been here 5 years, then 6, then 8, still no freedom papers, still no whispered promises. The only thing that changes is the way people look at you, as if you were never supposed to leave. You start to understand. You were never indentured. Not really. Your contract was a fiction, a temporary mask on something darker and permanent. You are, though no one's written it in law books, yet enslaved, and you're not alone. By the 1630s, there are dozens of black people in the Virginia colony. Some do gain freedom. A man named John Punch tries to run away in 1640 with 2 white indentured servants. They're all caught. The 2 white guys get 4 more years tacked on. John Punch, he's sentenced to a lifetime of labor. That punishment is the first official legal recognition of race-based slavery in the English colonies. It's also the moment you realize the rules are different now. The color of your skin is starting to matter more than the language you speak or the work you do. Historians still debate how conscious this shift was, whether the colonists were deliberately crafting a racial caste system or just winging it with their own brand of cruelty. Either way, you're the proof. You were once considered a servant. Now you're property. You've gone from human with a contract to human as. You try to piece together hope from fragments. You remember Anthony Johnson, the Angolan man who got his freedom, bought land, even owned servants. For a second, you think maybe you can follow that path, but then you hear what happened after he died. The Virginia court took his land and handed it to a white neighbor, claiming a Negro couldn't own property. So much for that dream. You look around and see other black faces, some born here, others newly stolen from West Africa. Together you create something new, a quiet kinship that doesn't need a shared language. You communicate in gestures, music, food, a piece of fish wrapped in leaves, a humming tune under your breath that makes someone nearby start to weep. A quirky tidbit: some colonial women actually complained that enslaved Africans were too well dressed on Sundays, fearing their lace collars and colorful sashes would shame poor white families. You weren't just surviving, you were shining, and it made them deeply uncomfortable. You do the math and realize most people in the colony can't read. You can't either, not yet, but you listen closely. You memorize the words of sermons and letters, pick up snippets from your overseers. You learn names: Governor Berkeley, the House of Burgesses, the English Crown, all those men deciding your fate, and none of them have ever looked you in the eye. Your master gives you a new name. It's not yours, but it becomes the one that people use. You keep your real name hidden inside your chest, like a secret flame. It's what you whisper at night before you sleep. It's what you hum when your back is breaking under the tobacco crates. No law can take that from you. Then one day, you see it on paper, your name, followed by the phrase, for the term of his natural life. You're now legally enslaved. It's official. There's no pretense anymore. You're not a servant. You're not temporary. You are a lifetime commodity. The person who owns you now passes you down in a will, right between a butter churn and a cow. You overhear him say, "He's a good investment." That sentence punches harder than any whip ever could. You're traded, sold again. This new place smells like moldy apples and damp timber. The land is bigger, the work harsher, and your new owner is a man who quotes the Bible while ordering beatings. Classic. You try to find small joys: a bluebird nesting in the rafters, the hush of the woods at dusk, the shared grin of another captive when you both pretend the overseer stepped in manure. Laughter is resistance. Don't forget that. And then you hear something new. Drums. Faint at first, then stronger. A group of Africans have gathered in secret to play rhythms from home, smuggled through memory and finger tapping. The beat is alive, and even though you're scared because secret gatherings can get you whipped or worse, you sneak closer, heart pounding. For a few minutes, the world changes. You're not in Virginia. You're on the shore of Angola, firelight dancing on your skin, surrounded by your people. It's not freedom, but it's proof you're not broken, not erased. Then someone shouts, the group scatters, the drums are burned the next morning, and new rules are whispered down the line. No gatherings of more than 4, no instruments, no dancing after sunset. Still, the rhythm stays in your chest. The transition is complete now. The colony no longer pretends that you're temporary labor. You are, in every way that counts, an enslaved person without rights, without protection, without even the illusion of escape. But here's what they didn't expect. You adapt, you survive, you build community, you raise children, you remember home in every recipe, every word, every silence. You are the living contradiction in their world, built on paper chains and wishful cruelty. And one day, soon, your resistance won't just be silent. You haul a barrel of tobacco to the curing barn, the straps biting into your shoulder, sweat already slicking your back though it's barely past sunrise. The wooden planks creak beneath your feet. Somewhere in the trees, a mockingbird sings like it's mocking you personally. You pause a second to breathe, and that's when you hear the overseer's boots on gravel. You keep moving. This isn't just another hard day, it's a turning point. Because while your body labors under the sun, something else is happening in the shadows. The lawmakers in Jamestown are drafting new orders, and this time, they're not hiding their intentions. It's the year 1661, and Virginia's House of the first elected legislative body in the American colonies, is quietly making history in the worst way. This year, they pass a law that says, if a black woman has children, those children will inherit her status. In other words, if you're enslaved, so are your kids, forever. It flips an old English common law rule on its head. Traditionally, children inherited the father's status, but that wouldn't do in a colony where white planters are increasingly, let's say, interacting with enslaved women, so they changed the rule. Now, every child of an enslaved woman, no matter who the father is born into slavery. Historians still argue whether this legal shift was planned with cold calculation or simply emerged from colonial necessity. Either way, the result is the same. You're not just enslaved, you're a womb that produces future capital. Let's be real, if you weren't wide awake before, that law probably jolted you into the present. Meanwhile, you start to see these laws multiply like mosquitoes in a barrel. One says enslaved people can't carry weapons, another bars them from testifying in court. Another bans interracial marriage, though that one seems more aimed at white guilt than actual prevention. And always, the laws are careful to tie status directly to skin color. This is where the paper chains really tighten. You used to exist in a weird in-between, part servant, part captive. But now, the system has a manual, and it's written in ink. And it isn't just Virginia. Maryland joins in too. By 1664, that colony passes its own set of laws, one of which says, any free woman who marries an enslaved man becomes enslaved herself. Romantic, right? Makes you want to never trust a Maryland wedding cake again. You see, white indentured servants win their freedom, get small plots of land, and even join local You're banned from owning property, carrying a stick, or learning to read. But here's the kicker. You're still taxed like a person and punished like property. It's a double bind only colonial legislators could dream up. You try to carve out normal moments. You build a small clay oven behind the cabin. You steal a chicken egg from the master's coop and share it with your neighbor. You hum lullabies from memory and carve patterns into the beams over your bed. Scratches that might one day tell a story if anyone's looking. A quirky fact: colonial law eventually required enslavers to supply enslaved people with one new set of clothing per year. Just one. That's it. So fashion innovation becomes necessity. Invent ways to patch, stitch, and decorate what little you have. Corn husks turn into hats. Ripped trousers become head wraps. Even when the world denies you dignity, you find it in the folds of a rag. Then one evening, you overhear a conversation between two overseers. They're grumbling about a new rule, something about not being able to beat them to death anymore. You blink. Did you mishear that? You didn't. In 1669, Virginia passes a law that says if an enslaver kills their own enslaved person during punishment, it's not a felony, because clearly, if a slave dies under punishment, they must have deserved it. Right? You feel something twist in your chest. That's not just cruelty, it's legal immunity. It's the colony declaring that your life has no legal value, no protection. You're a thing, a tool, and if that tool breaks under stress, that's just business. And yet, you still manage to live, to smile, even. You sneak a pinch of molasses from the storeroom. You grow a patch of beans behind the barn where no one notices. You teach your child to whistle like a nut. Small victories are survival. Then one day, you're brought before a local court. What? Because a neighbor accused you of theft. Doesn't matter that the man accusing you is known for lying. Doesn't matter that you're innocent. You're not allowed to speak in your own defense. The law bars enslaved people from testifying in any case involving a white person. It's not even a trial, it's a rubber stamp. Historians still debate how many of these court rulings were enforced or ignored. But for you, the law isn't some abstract debate. It's a whip in the hand of a man who doesn't need proof to punish you. And yet you still find ways to resist. You fake illness. You hide tools. You pass messages in braids. You sing songs with secret meanings. Codes passed from plantation to plantation. If they're going to make your life a prison, you're going to learn every creaking floorboard and every blind spot. You sit in the dirt one evening, child asleep on your lap, and think about a world where they never came for you. A life where the word freedom isn't just something white men shout over ale. But you also think about the people around you, the quiet strength in their eyes, the stubborn kindness, the unbreakable humanity. You were supposed to be a race. Instead, you're becoming something else. Something harder to define. Not quite slave, not quite servant, not just labor, but part of a growing, breathing community that remembers everything, even when the laws try to make you forget. You run your fingers over a carving you made in the cabin beam, just 3 lines, but they mean something. They mean, Aya was here. You push your fingers into the dry earth, planting tobacco seeds, while the sun licks your neck and your back threatens to seize. The dirt here is sticky, red, and alive with worms. It clings to your skin like a second layer. You've come to know this land better than the people who claim to own it. The planter who owns you is wealthy by colonial standards. At least, he brags about exporting pounds of sweet tobacco to England. Imagines himself a gentleman. But you know what really feeds his fortune? Stolen bodies and stolen time. Tobacco doesn't plant itself, harvest itself, or cure in the barns on sweet intentions. That's you, your hands, your sweat. And when people talk about early American wealth, they never seem to mention your name. Just labor, just servants, just capital. You look around and see the lie playing out in real time. At first, when you arrived here, they told you you'd be free. Someday, maybe 7 years, maybe 10, maybe just a few more harvests. You watched your neighbors count the days on bone, notches and charcoal walls. But the days kept stretching, the promises faded, the finish line kept vanishing behind fog. Then came the moment you asked, politely, just to confirm, when do I finish my time? Your master laughed, not cruelly, just casually. Oh, we don't free your kind, he said. And then he kept walking. You swallowed that sentence like broken glass, sharp, cold, permanent. And that's when the reality hits. You were never going to be free. Those promises were dust. Your life, your future, and everything you might have hoped for was sold for a golden leaf that burns in someone else's pipe. Historians still debate how widespread these broken promises were, especially in the early decades. Some say a handful of Africans earned freedom and land. Others argue those were anomalies used to sugarcoat a system that had already begun rotting from the inside. You don't need a historian to explain it. You live it. You notice how the white servants are treated differently, not kindly, but differently. When they finish their contracts, they get their freedom dues, a few tools, maybe a musket, sometimes even land near the frontier. They leave the fields with a limp and a grudge, but they leave. You stay, and you watch those same freedmen slowly turn against you. Once you shared food, traded stories, even helped each other escape the overseer's wrath. But now that they have a scrap of privilege, they guard it like a treasure chest. You're a threat. If you're free, then what makes them special? A quirky fact, in the 1650s, some enslaved Africans who gained freedom were actually allowed to own land, sue in court, and even enslave others. It's uncomfortable, complex, and messy, but it happened, and then it stopped. As the laws tightened, those freedoms were quietly erased. The window closed, the rules changed mid-game. The longer you labor in the fields, the more you feel the weight of your own erasure. You're not just working, you're being edited out. And yet, even within this system of betrayal, you find threads of strength. A woman named Saba teaches you to cook with river herbs that remind her of home. A boy named Yao shows you how to strip bark from a tree and turn it into salve for aching feet. You're building something: culture, memory, a new kind of family forged in fire. And through it all, the tobacco plants grow. Tall, stubborn, greedy. You come to hate the smell. It clings to your hair, your tongue, your skin. It means wealth to them and chains to you. One summer, a storm hits. Lightning splits a tree not 10 feet from your cabin. Your master loses half his crop. You stand in the doorway, drenched and smiling, just a little, just enough to remember the sky still answers to no one. But then comes a visitor. A traveling judge with a bad wig and worse breath. He's here to handle property disputes, which, of course, includes enslaved people. You watch as he settles a disagreement about a woman named Muna. 2 men claim to own her. She's standing there, arms crossed, gaze flat. The judge rules in favor of the younger man. No reason given. Just a shrug. Muna is handed over like a chair. She doesn't cry. She spits on the ground and walks away. You realize then that even your body isn't fully yours, not your arms, not your name, not your children. The law doesn't just permit betrayal, it requires it. Still, you resist in the ways that are still possible. You slow your pace just enough to ruin the harvest timing. You bend the drying rack so the leaves mold. You teach others how to fake illness. Little sabotages, small burns. They won't break the system, but they remind you still have choices. One night, after a long day in the barn, you sit outside and listen to the whip-poor wills calling in the dark. A girl braids your hair. Someone tells a joke in broken Portuguese that makes the whole group laugh too loud. The master shouts. The moment vanishes. But it happened. And that's the thing about these broken promises. No matter how many times they lie to you, you still find each other. Still build joy out of scraps. Still resist, even in the shadow of a golden leaf. You plant seeds of something stronger. You wake up in a cramped hut with 5 other people, all breathing slow and heavy in the early dawn. Someone's foot is in your face. Someone else is quietly praying. The morning smells like damp earth and ash from the night's cooking fire. You roll over, stretch your sore limbs, and brace for another day of work, but not in the usual way. Not today, because today you're marching off to work alongside white people, indentured servants, to be precise. A scruffy Irishman with straw-colored hair, a thin English girl with a cough that won't go away, a Dutch boy who still can't speak English without choking on the vowels, and you, a black man who's been here longer than most of them have been alive. It's a strange group. You share the same shovel, the same rotting boots, the same bowl of cornmeal mush. You joke together. You argue, you swap survival tricks. And sometimes when the master isn't looking, you talk, really talk. They ask you questions about Africa, and you tell them just enough. They teach you English swear words, and you pretend not to already know them. You all hate the overseer equally, which feels like a kind of friendship. Historians still argue whether early white and black laborers were truly equal, or whether racial lines were always lurking under the surface. But from your view in the trenches, you're just poor. Just hungry, just desperate, and you can feel a dangerous kind of unity forming, and that's exactly what terrifies the elites. You start hearing grumblings from the other servant stalk of rebellion, of rising up, of torching the governor's mansion. You think it's foolish, you think it's hopeful, you're not sure which is worse. Then, one night, the campfire talk becomes something more. You're approached by a man with a thick beard and fever-bright eyes. He says his name is Nathaniel Bacon, a former gentleman, educated, angry, dangerous, and he's building an army. You listen. At first, it's just a lot of shouting about corrupt governors and lazy aristocrats. But then he says, the thing that turns your ears cold. They treat you like dogs, but if you fight with me, I'll treat you like men. He's not just talking to the white servants, he's talking to you. This is 1676. and Bacon's rebellion is about to turn Virginia inside out. For a moment, blink a sparky, feel something shift. Black people and white people, enslaved and free, poor and poorer, all standing on the same side of a fire line. You're handed a rusted blade. Someone teaches you how to load a musket. The plan is chaos. Attack plantations, force reforms, burn the system to ash, and for a few glorious weeks, it works. Plantations go up in flames. Local elites run scared. The governor flees. You walk through scorched tobacco fields with your head held high, the smoke smelling sweeter than anything you've ever known. But then, like all things too bold to live, it collapses. Bacon dies of dysentery, like some ironic footnote in history's darkest joke. The rebellion crumbles, and in the aftermath, the colonial elite draw one brutal conclusion that can never happen again. The unity you shared, the shared suffering, the camaraderie, it was too dangerous, too equal, too human, so they divide you. Over the next few years, the colony rewrites its social order from the ground up. Laws begin to draw sharp, unmistakable lines between black and white. White indentured servants, once barely better off than you, are now told, "You're different, you're better, you're one of us." They're given privileges, small ones at first. The right to own land, the right to bear arms, the right to punish, the right to look down on you. Suddenly, your former friend won't look you in the eye. He won't eat with you, won't speak your name. You see it in his posture. He's protecting what little scrap of power he's been handed. And if that means pushing you down, so be it. A quirky detail. One law even banned black people from testifying against white people in court, even if the white person was a criminal, or an abuser, or flat out insane. It wasn't about justice. It was about silencing. You feel the wall go up, not brick by brick, but law by law. The term white starts showing up in documents, in court rulings, in church records. Before now, people called themselves English or Christian, but now, white. As if that single word could justify anything. And for enslaved people like you, the impact is immediate. More patrols, harsher punishments, less chance of escape, of justice, of anything resembling hope. You hear whispers that some free black men are losing land they legally purchased, that others are being kidnapped and There's no such thing as safety anymore, not even in freedom. You keep your head down, you bury your rage, but inside, you mourn something you hadn't realized was even alive, the possibility of solidarity. You used to laugh with that Irish boy. Now he reports you for stealing eggs. But still, in the corners, resistance simmers, quiet, angry, slow. You trade stories again. You whispered names of people who escaped. You pass down the tale of Bacon's rebellion, not as a cautionary tale but as a reminder that once, for a fleeting moment, the lines cracked, the masks slipped, and poor folks black and white stood together. The elite made sure it would never happen again. But you remember, the nights grow longer. You've taken to listening for footsteps in your sleep, not because someone might come to steal your freedom, but because someone might come to steal your child. You watch as your daughter learns to walk in the dirt yard behind the cabin, her arms outstretched, wobbling with pride. She doesn't know yet what her birth means, that her status was sealed before she even drew her first breath, that because you are enslaved, she is too automatically, legally, permanently. You don't tell her, not yet, but the world will. It's the 1660s, and hereditary slavery has now hardened into law. It started quietly, almost innocently, just a few sentences tucked into colonial legal codes, but it spread like mold through a damp cabin, and now it covers everything. In the law books of Virginia, the rule is written, pater sequitur ventrum, the child follows the womb, which means no matter who the father is, white, free, married, or priestiff, the mother is enslaved, so is the child. It's clever in the cruelest way, because now enslaved women aren't just laborers, they're factories, they're property that reproduces property. You feel the shift immediately. Your body is now a target, not just for labor, but for ownership. White men see you differently, not like a person, not even like a servant, but like an investment with a heartbeat, in the way they talk about you when they think you're not listening. And when a white man takes what he wants from an enslaved woman, the result, his own child, isn't a scandal. It's profit. Historians still argue over how systematic these violations were, whether they were driven by cruelty, economics, or both. But for you, living it, The reason doesn't matter. The damage does. You learn to navigate this world with impossible precision, to protect your child, to shield her not just from harm, but from being seen, because being seen means being sold, or worse. You start working slower, not from laziness, but as strategy. The less valuable you appear, the less likely you are to be separated. You feign illness, you underperform, you play the part of someone broken, because in this world, to survive, sometimes you have to hide your strength, but not everyone can hide. Your friend Benny gives birth to twin boys. A few weeks later, she's sent to a plantation upriver. Her children stay behind. She begs, she screams. The overseer shrugs. They're not yours anymore, and they never were. Not legally, not by the rules of this world. You see this happen again and again. Families broken like dry twigs. Mothers sold from sons. Husbands sent away in chains. Babies taken as payment for gambling debts. Each one is a scar you carry, even if it isn't yours. A quirky fact. One colonial court ruled that even if a white man married an enslaved black woman, their children would still be enslaved, and so would the woman. Love, apparently, doesn't beat property rights in colonial Virginia. But something begins to grow under the surface. A kind of resistance. Not loud, not exploviate, but deliberate. Women start passing information through lullabies. Warnings disguised as lyrics, codes in rhythm. The tune might sound like a cradle song, but the meaning is razor sharp. Don't trust that man. The road to the river is watched. He's lying about the papers. You join this underground choir, your voice soft, your words sharper than any knife. At night, you teach your daughter to hum, not because she understands yet, but because she will. And while the laws continue to pile up, so do the ways you learn to outmaneuver them. You hide food, you save scraps of cloth, you barter favors for extra time with your child. You teach her words in your language, the one you barely remember but refuse to lose. She laughs, and it sounds like home. Meanwhile, the laws grow stranger, more obsessive. One statute says enslaved people can't learn to write. Another forbids gathering without a white person present. A third bans travel without written permission. Fear is making the lawmakers frantic. You can smell it. And that fear, its power, you use it. You start to hear stories from farther down the river, rumors of people who vanished, who followed the stars and made it to freedom. You don't know if the stories are true, but you repeat them anyway, because stories are currency. Stories keep hope alive. One night, while walking back from the fields, you see something carved into a tree trunk, a spiral. Nothing else, just that. To anyone else, it's meaningless, but to you, it's a sign. You were told to watch for it. It means someone came this way. Someone made it. You don't cry. You smile. Just a little. Later, you sit beside your daughter and run your fingers through her hair. You think about her future, not the one this world has written for her, but the one you whisper into her dreams. You tell her about the stars, about names that cannot be taken, about rivers that run north, because if you can plant anything in this poisoned soil, let it be the seed of memory. She looks up at you and says, your name in her tiny voice, your real name, the one you thought you'd lost. And just like that, for one heartbeat, you are free. The baby comes just after midnight. You're in the corner of a drafty barn, squatting in straw that smells like mildew and manure, clenching your teeth against the pain. There's no midwife, no medicine, just two other women holding your hands and whispering prayers in a language the overseers never bothered to learn. You bite down on your own arm to keep from screaming, and when the child slips into the world slick warm, quiet, you know two things instantly. She is yours, and she is not yours. Not really, because Virginia law says she belongs to someone else. It's the early 1700s now, and the rules have become more than just rules, they're architecture. A carefully engineered system where every nail, every beam, every brick of law supports one goal: to ensure that slavery is permanent, inescapable. Inescapable. You cradle your daughter. She blinks up at you, confused by the light, by the cold. She hasn't cried yet. For a terrifying second, you think maybe she won't. But then she opens her mouth and howls, and you exhale with gratitude and grief, all tangled into one. You name her quietly, a name from your grandmother's village. You do not tell the overseer. The name he writes down for her is something English, something heavy and foreign, but her real name lives between the two of you, carried in breath and memory. You stay in that barn for 2 days. They say it's kindness. Really, they just don't want a newborn slowing you down. But the moment you're back on your feet, you're back in the fields, your child tied to your back with a strip of fraying linen, she sleeps as you dig. She wails when you stop moving, and in that moment, you realize what you've become: a mother, a worker, and an unwilling breeder. Because here's the thing: childbirth, once private and sacred, has now become a tool of the state. By the mid-1700s, enslaved women are having more children than ever before, not because life has gotten easier, but because colonists have figured out that homegrown slavery is cheaper than import. The transatlantic trade is still grinding along, but there's a shift happening beneath your feet. Your womb isn't just part of you, it's policy. Historians still debate how conscious this pivot was, but the trend is undeniable. Planters begin to view enslaved women not just as laborers, but as future wealth generators. Each child you bear increases their net worth. You're quite literally a walking investment portfolio. You hear stories, ugly ones, about women forced into pregnancy, about rewards given to those with the most children, about punishments for barrenness. You don't know how much is rumor and how much is real, but it doesn't matter. The point is clear: your reproductive life no longer belongs to you. A quirky tidbit: some planters kept meticulous breeding records, like livestock logs, dates, outcomes, notes like strong hips, or likely twins. You've never seen the ledgers, but you've seen the men with quills, watching your body like it's a science project. The worst part? It works. The enslaved population begins to grow rapidly, children born into bondage, never knowing anything else. No ships, no coastal memories, just chains wrapped in lullabies. And you, standing in the middle of it, are forced to keep going. You raise your daughter as best you can. You teach her to move silently, to listen more than she speaks, to never trust a promise made with a smile. You teach her how to cook with almost nothing, how to read weather in the clouds, how to hum without being heard. One day, she asks you what her name means. You tell her. You say it means light that hides. She nods solemnly, like she already understands more than she should. And she does, because even at 7, she knows what it means when someone points at her and whispers. She knows why the master's wife has started calling her a fine little thing. She knows to stay close to you, to avoid empty rooms, to never go anywhere without being sent. You feel time speeding up. Your body hurts in new ways. You've buried 2 children. You've stopped hoping for freedom. Now, you just hope your daughter survives. One winter, you overhear a conversation to men debating whether to sell your daughter to a plantation in Carolina. One wants the money. The other thinks she'll fetch more once she's a little older. You almost scream. Instead, you dig deeper. You clean faster. You make yourself indispensable. You trade favors, information, anything that will delay the sale. It works for now, but the clock is ticking. One night, your daughter wakes you with a whisper. "Mama, what if we ran away?" You freeze, not because the idea is new, but because she said it out loud. She tells you she's been watching the stars, listening to the older boys, learning which roads lead north. She says she knows how to walk quietly, how to carry water in her mouth, how to avoid dogs. You smile, trembling. You kiss her forehead and whisper, "Not yet," because not yet is better than never. And because deep down, even with all you've seen, all you've survived, you still believe something. That she might live to see a different world, a freer one where her name, her real name, is spoken without fear. You lie awake the rest of the night, eyes wide, listening to her breathe. And in the morning, before the sun rises, you scratch a mark into the cabin wall, a symbol only she will recognize, a promise. You move slower now. Your knees ache when the rains come, and your hands, once calloused and sure, sometimes fumble the hoe, but you're still here. And that's more than some can say. Your daughter is 12 now, tall, sharp-eyed, quiet. She's learned to listen first, speak later. She knows the names of every overseer and every shortcut through the woods. She also knows how to smile with her mouth while keeping her thoughts locked behind her eyes. You're proud, terrified, proud again. By now, the enslaved population in Virginia has ballooned, no longer a minority, no longer scattered or uncertain now. You and your people are the backbone of the entire colonial economy. The laws have kept coming, thicker and crueler, but they've also made one thing accidentally clear. They are afraid of you. They wouldn't go to such lengths to control you if they didn't fear what would happen the moment they lost that control. And they are right to be afraid. because something is happening. It starts like a whisper, passed between the rows of sugarcane and the back corners of smokehouses. A name, a plan, a date. You're used to whispers, but this one is different, sharper, heavier. His name is Gabriel Prosotal, literate, enslaved, and angry in a way that feels organized. He's planning something big, not just escape. Revolution. You hear that word and feel your heartbeat double. But before Gabriel, there were others. Men and women who dared to imagine life beyond chains. Some tried to escape and vanished into the woods. Some were caught and hung from trees as examples, but they kept trying. A quirky fact. Some enslaved folks tried to fake illness by eating clay, or others staged elaborate escape plots with forged papers, disguises, even fake funerals. Creativity, it turns out, is its own kind of rebellion, and now rebellion feels like it's in the air. Historians still argue whether early slave revolts were rare due to logistical limitations, or because enslaved people feared retaliation against their families. You know, it was both and something more. It's one thing to run, it's another to organize, to trust, to plan. But in 1800, Gabriel does. He recruits dozens, maybe hundreds, blacksmiths, laborers, field hands, even some freedmen. The plan: march on Richmond, seize weapons, hold the governor hostage, demand the end of slavery in Virginia. It's bold, it's breathtaking, it almost happens. But the night before the rebellion, a hurricane strikes, roads flood, bridges collapse, and while Gabriel delays, someone breaks. 2 men, terrified or tempted, tell the authorities everything. The plan unravels before it even begins. Gabriel is captured, tried, and hanged. So are 26 others. Their bodies are left to rot as a warning. You hear about it days later. Their names reach you like echoes through the fields. Gabriel's rebellion never made it to your plantation, but it reaches your mind, your daughter's too. Because even in failure, it meant something. It meant that rebellion wasn't impossible, that you weren't alone in your anger, in your dreaming, that maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't invincible. And that's the real threat, isn't it? In the years that follow, the laws grow even harsher. Fear clings to the elite like swamp rot. They ban all black gatherings even for funerals. They increase patrols. They put bounties on literacy. One law even mandates that enslaved people caught with books be whipped. You've never held one, but you know your daughter has. Late at night, you've seen her tracing invisible letters into the dirt, practicing, risking everything. You pretend not to notice, but you whisper a quiet blessing to the stars. She asks you once what freedom would look like. You think carefully, then say, a room with a lock that only you control. She doesn't get it at first, but a few days later, she repeats it. And you know she understands. You also know she's planning something, not recklessly but steadily, like Gabriel did. You see her talking to the stable boys, trading scraps for news from travelers. She even befriends a new overseer's daughter Tuazeli, to purpose. You don't ask questions. You don't have to. Instead, you take her aside one night and press something into her hand, a piece of cloth with a simple symbol stitched in the corner, a spiral, like the one carved on that tree long ago, the one you never forgot. She clutches it, nods. You don't say goodbye, but you know it's coming. The next week, she's gone. You feel the absence like a kicked lung. The others whisper. Some blame you, some envy you, some say she's dead. Some say she's halfway to Canada. He stays silent. The patrols intensify. They search the cabins. They drag 2 boys away in chains, even though they had nothing to do with it. You grit your teeth and keep your head low. And then, one night, in the ashes of the fireplace, you find it, a tiny scrap of paper, just 2 words, still running. You hold it in your hands like it's made of gold, because now you know she's alive, she's free, and she remembers. You don't smile when you read the note, not openly. Smiling would raise questions. Instead, you slip the scrap of paper into your sleeve and carry on as if nothing has changed. But everything has. Your daughter is gone, not taken, not stolen, freed herself, and you want to scream with pride. Instead, you pour it into silence, into stillness, into the rhythm of survival. You walk the same paths she once did, past the stream where she washed laundry, the cabin wall where she used to scratch her height with charcoal, the field where she picked tobacco with bleeding fingers. Every corner of this place holds her echo, but now that echo carries something new. Hope you hum softly at night, and the others begin to notice you're humming the same tune your mother used to sing, an old melody with no known lyrics. You realize it's your way of remembering, of keeping your daughter alive in sound. Word spreads, quietly, carefully, not just about your girl, but about others. Boys who vanished in the night, women who vanished in men's clothing. Someone saw a freedman with a familiar nose, tending to horses in Pennsylvania. No one confirms anything, but the stories move faster than the patrols, and the laws tighten in response. By the early 1800s, it's clear that escape isn't just a fear, it's an epidemic. The elite panic. They fund slave patrols, form committees, pay bounties for information. They demand passes for every errand, every walk, every breath outside the plantation fence. You need permission to exist. A quirky tidbit: some enslaved people forged passes, using boiled onions to mimic ink. Others learned to forge their enslaver's handwriting by watching him sign letters over and over again. The Underground Railroad didn't start as a network. It started as an idea, and ideas spread. You notice something else, too. White folks are starting to argue, not over whether slavery exists, they're still perfectly comfortable with that, but over whether it's sustainable, whether it's moral, whether it's compatible with the shiny new thing they call democracy. You hear whispers about a document written in Philadelphia, the Declaration. You can't read it, but someone tells you what it says. All men are created equal. You laugh so hard, you cry. Historians still debate whether the founding fathers saw their hypocrisy or simply ignored it. You don't need a debate. You see the proof every day in the fields, in the stocks, in the auction block. But something else is brewing. A preacher comes through the area, black, fierce, with a voice like thunder and eyes that know too much. His name is Denmark Vesey, and he's not here to console. He's here to warn, to prepare. He tells you that Charleston is boiling over, that there are people hundreds ready to rise, free and enslaved, side by side. He talks about Haiti, where the enslaved rose up and won. A whole country freed itself. You never learn the names, but the story is gospel now. Your mind reels. You never imagined a nation without slavery, and now you need to believe in it. Vesey's plan is bold. He aims for an uprising so vast, so well organized, it would shake the very bones of America. But someone talks. There's always someone. The rebellion is crushed before it begins. Vesey is executed, along with 34 others. The message is clear. Don't even think about it. And yet, you do. Because even in failure, every rebellion leaves a scar, and scars are The vestryman can outlaw gatherings, can shutter churches, can confiscate hymeneals, but they can't stop the memory. They can't unplant the seed. You'd begin to notice changes in yourself. You speak less, but hear more. You walk with purpose. You know that you're not alone in your thoughts. There are others. They look at you a second too long. They nod once in passing. That's all it takes. And then one day, something different happens. A woman older than you, missing 3 teeth, always muttering to herself, leans over during a church service and presses a pebble into your hand. Not a note, not a name, just a pebble. Smooth and round. It's a signal. She tells you to bury it near the sycamore tree if you want to go. Just that. No pressure, no promises. Just a choice. You think about it for days. You don't sleep. You imagine your daughter's face older now, stronger. You wonder if she still remembers how to hum that melody. You wonder if she's safe, if she's waiting, and on the 5th night, you take the pebble, walk to the tree, and bury it in silence. The next morning, there's a loaf of bread left by your cabin door. Wrapped in it, a scrap of wool and a hand-drawn star map. You're going, but not yet. Because first, you need to prepare. You stash dried food under floorboards. You memorize the paths the dogs don't know. You mark which patrolmen drink too much and which ones leave gaps in their rounds. You listen to every conversation. You watch, and then without ceremony, without a goodbye, you vanish into the night. The sky is overcast. The map is useless. You rely on instinct, on sound, on memory. 3 days in, you injure your foot on a branch and limp for miles. You eat roots. You drink from muddy creeks. You almost freeze. But you keep going, because the moment you stopped belonging to someone else was the moment you chose to run. Freedom is not a place. It's not a destination. It's a decision, and you've made it. The cold wakes you before the sun does. Your foot is swollen, your stomach's empty, your body battered by thorns, hunger, and sleeplessness feels like it might betray you at any second. But the air smells like pine and river water, and there are no dogs barking. That counts for something. You're still running, still free. Somewhere behind you, plantation bells are ringing. Not for you, not anymore. Somewhere in front of you, people are gathering kindling for the morning fire, pouring coffee, arguing about the price of eggs. People who've never thought twice about who planted the food on their table. And somewhere not so far off, now is the next safe house. You've made it onto a stretch of what they're starting to call the Underground Railroad. Though, let's be honest, it's not underground, and it's definitely not a railroad. It's more like a constellation of fragile, flickering kindnesses, secret attic spaces, false bottom wagons, quilts hung in windows with patterns that whisper, yes, here, and it's not always who you expect. A white woman in a Quaker bonnet passes you a biscuit wrapped in a scripture verse. A black man working a stable mutters, "Go north," without moving his lips. A school teacher with too many freckles presses a worn pair of boots into your hands without saying a word. These are the helpers, the sparks in the dark. You learn to move at night, to trust birdsong more than clocks. You start judging people by their shoe-scuffed soles, mean hard work. Clean heels mean danger. You learn to cough like a free man, to walk like someone who belongs, to keep your head not down, but exactly at the right tilt of polite invisibility. Historians still argue how formal the railroad was in its earliest days. Some insist it was mostly spontaneous. Others claim early codes and routes were mapped far earlier than documented. But to you, in the thick of it, labels don't matter. What matters is who lets you in and who slams the door. And sometimes the door slams hard. One night, you arrive at a house you were told was safe. You knock 3 times just as but the person who answers flinches when they see your face. They hesitate. They whisper something in Dutch to someone behind the door. You wait. Then they close it. You spend the night in a ditch, soaked and shivering, and you realize something. There's no such thing as a perfect plan, only momentum. You have to keep moving, even when the path vanishes beneath your feet. A quirky detail. Some freedom seekers carried onions to mask their scent from hounds. Others use grease or peppermint. You chew wild herbs and smear clay on your skin not just for camouflage, but because it makes you feel like you're part of the earth again. Not property, not prey. Person. You hear about a woman's maul, fierce, barefoot, who's leading people north through the swamps. They call her Moses. You don't meet her, but her legend moves faster than the hounds. Some say she's bulletproof. Some say she never loses a soul. Her name, Harriet Tubman. You grip that name like a lantern. The North becomes more than geography. It becomes metaphor. Every tree you pass, every creek you ford, is part of the journey toward it. And yet, the further north you go, the more you realize the line isn't sharp. It's blurry. You finally cross into Pennsylvania. There's no welcome sign, no choir of angels, just a crooked milestone marker and a flock of crows. But it's real. You fall to your knees and cry, not because you're safe, because you're closer. You spend weeks working odd jobs in back alleys and horse yards, saving coin, eating crusts, and watching every white man who walks too slow. You meet others like you, half starved, half smiling, alive. You swap stories, share routes, mark maps with charcoal. Freedom, it turns out, is not just a line you cross. It's a condition you build, brick by brick, favor by favor, name by name, and still, you carry her in your heart, your daughter. You wonder if her trail looked like this, if someone helped her the way they helped you, if she, too, had to sleep under thorns and walk until her shoes bled. You imagine her standing tall, working in a shop, reading a book she once risked her life to touch. One morning, while sweeping outside a boarding house in New York, you see a girl staring at you. She looks almost like her. Almost, but she isn't. She walks away, humming softly. You hum back just one note of that melody you used to sing when she was little. The one that had no words. The one that meant home. The girl pauses, turns, smiles, just a little. You don't follow. You just stand there, broom in hand, feeling the weight of that smile like a warm coat. You keep sweeping. You keep breathing, because this is not the end. You're not done running, not away, but toward a life you choose, toward a name that's fully yours, toward the chapter they'll try not to write in their history books. But you were here, and you are still running. You take a new name. It doesn't sound like the one you were born with, not the one whispered by your grandmother under a full moon, but it's yours now, chosen with care. You pick it from a list tacked to a church wall. You test it in your mouth like a secret, and when no one calls you by it, you still answer inside your own head. Freedom, it turns out, is not just a place, it's the right to name yourself and be believed. You're in New York now, or maybe Philadelphia. The city smells like coal smoke and horse sweat, and the streets are loud with a kind of organized chaos. You rent a bed in a boarding house crammed with too many people and too few windows. The walls are thin, the nights are long, but no one owns you. That's the difference. By day, you load crates on the docks. By night, you sweep floors in a newspaper office where the ink stains your fingers and no one looks too closely at your past. You listen to the press, hammer out headlines. You don't read them, not yet, but you learn the rhythm. You feel the pulse of the world shifting, letter by letter. And then one night, while mopping near the back door, you overhear something. It's not a new word, but it lands like thunder, because now you're hearing it from white mouths. Loud ones, passionate ones, foolish, maybe but brave. They talk about ending slavery, not just tolerating free black folks up north, but abolishing slavery everywhere. You lean in, you memorize names. Gat Douglas. You don't trust them, not completely, but you listen, because maybe, just maybe, the tide is turning. Historians still debate how effective the early abolitionists were, whether they moved too slowly, argued too much, or alienated the very people they hoped to help. But to you, the existence of any movement is proof. The silence is breaking. You attend your first meeting in the basement of a Methodist church. It smells like wax and nervous sweat. The room is filled with strange Allah's radical white preachers, free black women in starched bonnets, Irish immigrants who speak too fast, and one man with a wooden leg who reads poetry with his eyes closed. You sit in the back. You say nothing, but your presence says plenty, and then someone calls for testimonies. A woman stands. Her voice shakes. She tells the story of her escape from Maryland, the dogs, the frostbite, the child she lost along the way. You lock eyes with her, and without a word, you both understand. Same road. You begin speaking, little by little, first to her, then to others. You don't give details, just shapes, moods, warnings, and suddenly, you find yourself part of something. You start helping, not openly, not loudly, but carefully. You pass along messages, draw maps in ash on the undersides of crates, leave extra food near the rail station. You become the thing you once searched for, a helper, and one day, you're given a choice. There's a wagon heading out before dawn. Inside, a young mother and her son. They need an escort to the next town, a guide, a lookout, someone who knows the signs. The others look to you. You hesitate. You haven't left the city in years. Your limp's gotten worse. You still wake up gasping from dreams of hounds. But the boy looks like your brother. The mother hums a song, you know. You say yes. The journey is brutal. The wagon breaks down. The boy gets a fever. You spend a night hiding under a collapsed barn with your ear pressed to the ground, listening for hoofbeat. But you make it. When you leave them at the edge of a safe house garden, the mother squeezes your hand and says, "You're the road." You don't know what she means at first, but it stays with you. Because now, you are a quirky fact. Some safe houses use blue bottles hung from trees as markers. Others carved symbols into You begin to recognize them all like a language no school ever taught you. The network grows. People pass names across state lines. Pennsylvania to Ohio. Ohio to Michigan. Michigan to the Canadian border. The path is still dangerous, but it exists, and that makes it powerful. You finally learn to read slowly, carefully. You start with hymnals, then broadsheets. Then, one night, you hold a copy of the North Star, the paper run by Frederick Douglass himself. You trace his name with your finger, a man who was once enslaved, now writing for the world. His words crackle with fire. You wonder what your daughter would say if she could see this, if she'd laugh at your thick glasses, if she'd tease your shaky handwriting. You imagine her reading beside you, correcting your syllables, grinning wide. Maybe she already has. You meet people who claim they know her. Someone says she'd married a sailor. Someone else says she'd opened a school in Canada. You nod. You don't press. Sometimes stories are enough. And then one day, while standing outside a bakery, you hear a familiar sound, a melody, hummed low. You turn. A woman is leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes full of mischief and fire. She hums again. You finish the tune. Neither of you speaks. She just walks up, takes your arm, and says, "Took you long enough." You don't cry, not yet. You wait until you're walking side by side, down a street with no chains, no overseers, no whip cracks hiding in the silence. And for the first time in decades, you breathe like a whole person. You laugh now. Real, open-throated laughter, the kind that echoes off cobblestones and startles pigeons. People stare, but you don't care. Let them stare. You've earned this. Your daughter walks beside you like she never left. Older, yes. Yes. But still her. Still yours. And now that you're together, the silence between you fills with stories. You tell her about the swamp crossings, the ditch you slept in, the onions you chewed to confuse the hounds. She tells you about the farmhouse in Vermont, the abolitionist family who taught her to read, the little girl she adopted as her own. You try not to think about the years you missed, the birthdays, the heartbreaks, the days she needed you and you were just a memory, but you both know without having to say it that surviving meant separation. That love, in your world, always had to take the shape of sacrifice. So now, you build something new. You settle in a town near the Canadian border. It's small, wind-bitten, and full of people like you runaways turned residents, fugitives turned neighbors. You work in a laundry house. She teaches letters at the local church. You plant onions in the garden. This time not to throw off dogs, but to flavor stew. At night, she reads aloud while you mend clothes. Her voice is steady, confident. Each word feels like another stone placed in the road she's building, the one she wants to leave behind for others. And there are others. More and more. The railroad grows. Now it has names, conductors, stations, routes mapped in whispers and smuggled letters, and USU become one of them. It starts with a knock, then a family of 3, then a young man with a bullet scar in his shoulder, then a girl who refuses to speak, her hands always clenched. You welcome them, feed them, hide them when necessary, and every time you do, you feel it again. You are the road now. You stitch quilts with secret symbols in the corners. You memorized new stars. You invent new names for yourself every time someone asks, not because you're afraid but because freedom means never being trapped in just one version of who you are. A quirky fact, some quilts really did carry codes patterns that meant safe house ahead or change direction. Historians still argue whether these codes were widespread or mostly legend, but You've seen the look in a traveler's eyes when they spot that triangle of red stitching. They know. You begin speaking at gatherings, churches, libraries, homes lit with lanterns and purpose. You never mention names, never give too much detail. But your story, your presence, does something words never could. People sit straighter when you talk. Some cry, some offer money, some offer more. You never ask anyone to become a station on the railroad. But after your visit, they start hanging quilts, leaving biscuits on the porch, moving firewood in 3s. Still, danger never leaves completely. You're across the border, but the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 spreads like a clawed hand. It reaches deep into the North and demands that even free states return escapees to their former owners. No one is safe, not even you. One night, 2 men in coats ask too many questions. One has soft shoes, the other smells like ink. Your daughter sends you to the neighbor's cellar without hesitation. You crouch among pickles and jars, listening to them lie for you. When it's safe again, you all laugh. But you also know the claws are getting longer. Historians still debate how many people the railroad helped. Some say 30,000. Others estimate far more. But you're not interested in numbers. You're interested in names, in faces. In the soft knock at midnight, that means someone chose hope. And hope, you learn, is addictive. You start writing down the stories not in your name, not in any clear order, but as little fragments. A boy who carried a broken compass, a woman who gave birth in a rowboat, a man who sang fake lullabies to cover the sounds of digging. You write because forgetting feels like a second death. And yet, even with all your fire, the world resists. You hear about slave catchers roaming Ohio, about families torn from homes and dragged south again. You hear about politicians preaching unity while ignoring the broken bodies slavery has left in its wake. You hear arguments about states' rights and economics and property, as if people could be reduced to columns on a ledger. It makes your blood boil. You try to shield your daughter from it, but she's already seen worse. And now, she's louder than you, more fearless. She travels to cities and speaks on stages. She uses her real name, and she dares anyone to stop her. You watch her with awe and fear, but mostly awe. She tells you about a man named John Brown, about Kansas, about violence. You flinch. She doesn't. You see it in her eyes. The fight is no longer just about escape. It's about abolition, not survival justice. And justice is hungry. You begin to understand something strange. Freedom isn't the end of the story. It's the middle, because freedom means choices, and choices mean responsibility, and responsibility means risk. Still, you press on. You patch another quilt. You memorize another name. You wait for the next knock on your door. And when it comes, you answer without fear, because you remember the sound of your daughter's voice the day she found you again. And you know, the road goes on. The war drums start quietly. At first, it's just murmurs in taverns and headlines in crumpled newspapers, disputes over territory, taxation, tariffs. You've seen it before. White men arguing about money while pretending it's about morality. But this time, something's different. The words union and secession start showing up more than once a page. There's tension in the ethic electric, ready to snap. You're older now, not fragile, not feeble juice seasoned. Your knees ache in the cold, and your back has stories it hasn't told in years. But your eyes are sharp, and your ears sharper. You see what's coming, and then, one morning, it happens. South Carolina secedes. You're sewing when someone bursts into the church meeting house, breathless, wide-eyed. They're leaving. The South is leaving. You pause mid-stitch, thread dangling, heart suddenly pounding with something that feels suspiciously like hope. Because if they're breaking away, if the states that need slavery are fracturing, maybe, just maybe, the whole system is finally breaking. But don't get too excited. As war looms, so does confusion. The North isn't exactly an abolitionist paradise. Most of the white men in power still don't care about enslaved people. They care about economics, about preserving the Union, about not looking weak. Historians still argue whether the Civil War was truly about slavery or just about political control. But for you, on the ground, the cause is as clear as the scars on your back. Slavery is the root. Everything else is camouflage. Your daughter speaks at a rally. The crowd cheers when she says the word freedom, but they grow quiet when she talks about land, justice, compensation. They like freedom as a concept. They don't like it as a reality with a bill attached. Still, she doesn't stop. She speaks louder. She starts organizing fundraisers, collecting clothes, raising money for newly escaped families who flooded into northern towns, refugees from the chaos, already spreading through border states. And then comes a name. Fort Sumter. April 1861. Gunfire. Cannons. Smoke. The war has started, and suddenly, the railroad doesn't feel like a quiet rebellion anymore. It feels like a lifeline. People are running faster now. The border states are turning into war zones. Men are being drafted. Families are scattering. And in the chaos, thousands of enslaved people take their shot. They escape in droves, slipping through the cracks while the cracks are still forming. You take in 3 families in 1 week. One man's hands are shredded from climbing a fence of nails. A child can't speak above a whisper after watching soldiers burn down their quarters. You do what you can: bandage, feed, soothe. But you know there's no such thing as safety now, only motion. A quirky fact: some Union generals start referring to escaped slaves as contraband of war. It's absurd, insulting, and yet oddly useful, because labeling humans as property captured from the enemy means they can't be sent back. So people begin walking toward Union camps in the thousands, seeking protection, seeking purpose. And you start seeing uniforms, black uniforms, not just laborers, not just cooks, but soldiers. The United States colored troops are forming, and your people who were once forbidden to read, write, or walk freely are now arming themselves and marching for something bigger. Your daughter joins a medical corps. She learns to dress wounds and write down final words. You beg her not to go. She goes anyway. You taught me to run, she says. Now I need to stand. You hold her tight. You cry, finally, because you realize this isn't just about escaping anymore. This is about rewriting the world. You help where you can. You cook for volunteers, sue for regiments, copy down names of the fallen so their families might one day know. You don't fight, but you resist. And then, in the middle of a snowstorm, you hear it. Emancipation. Lincoln's proclamation hits like a hammer through glass. January 1st, 1863. It doesn't free everyone, only those in rebel states, only those not already captured, but it's a shift, a declaration, a turning point. You remember the plantation, the chains, the mark on your shoulder. You remember every name that didn't make it, every breath stolen, every dream buried. And now, the President of the United States is saying the word freedom out loud. Historians still argue whether Lincoln truly believed in black equality or just used emancipation as a military strategy. But to you, it doesn't matter how the door opened, only that it did. The war drags on, bloody, brutal. Every day brings new lists of the dead, but also new fugitives, new fighters, new hope. You keep writing, recording stories, sewing codes into scarves. You become a grandmother figure to hundreds of travelers, a lighthouse. And one evening, while peeling apples by the fire, your daughter rushes in, hair wild, cheeks flushed. "It's over," she gasps. "It's over." You drop the knife. It's 1865. The Confederacy has surrendered. The war is over. Slavery is officially, and for the first time in your life, you sleep without wondering who owns you tomorrow. The morning after the war ends, the world feels too quiet. You wake before dawn, out of habit. Your hands reach for your boots the same way they did every morning on the plantation. Your knees creak, your shoulders crackened. Then you remember, you're free, for real this time. It doesn't feel like a celebration, not yet. It feels like a pause, a space between heartbeats. Outside, the streets are busy. Bells are ringing. A group of boys run past, shouting something about Grant. Church bells chime with a kind of hesitant joy, like even the metal is unsure this is real. People hug, weep, dance. You sit on your porch and sip warm tea with shaking hands. You've dreamed of this moment for decades, and now that it's here, you mostly feel tired. Not from the night's sleep, but from surviving. The war is over. The Emancipation Proclamation has already reshaped the South. And now, in December of 1865, the 13th Amendment is ratified. It doesn't just promise freedom, it cements it. No more half measures, no more loopholes. Slavery is abolished. You stare at the newspaper for hours, running your finger along the printed words, mouthing them aloud. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. Historians still argue how much immediate impact the amendment had. You don't need debate. You lived through the before. You feel the difference. You know the cost. But freedom, as you quickly learn, doesn't come with instructions. And it certainly doesn't come with equality. Because the South, bitter and battered, isn't interested in building a new world for the formerly enslaved. It's interested in control. And so the black codes are new shackles, made of paper and ink instead of iron. Your daughter calls them freedom's fine print. Still, you push forward. Freedmen's schools open, and you help build one with your bare hands. You carry timber, mix mud, hammer nails with a rhythm you haven't known since your escape. You help teach younger children their letters even, though your own handwriting still wobbles like a drunkard's walk. A quirky detail, some freedmen's schools used broken glass bottles as makeshift window panes and pages from old Bibles as practice sheets. You remember tracing the word grace over and over until it didn't look like a stranger. You plant a garden, not for a master, but for your family, on land you lease. It's small, rocky, stingy with its corn, but it's yours. You finally laugh without guilt, but you're not naive. You see the threats? The white men riding on horseback in the night, the burning crosses, the whisper of a name that becomes fear itself. Ku Klux Klan. They hate that you're still standing, that your back is straight, that your daughter teaches school and your neighbor owns a blacksmith shop. They want to drag you back into the darkness, if not by law, then by rope. And yet, you don't flinch, because you've already survived worse. You've run through swamps, buried friends, dug freedom out of gravel and prayers. You've crossed borders, erased names, built new ones from ash and defiance. Now, you organize. You attend church meetings where strategies are whispered. You link arms in public protests. You help people register to vote on when it means risking your life. Your hands are too old for weapons, but your voice, it's louder than ever. Your daughter marries a veteran from the United States Colored Troops. You walk her down the aisle. You don't cry well. Not much. The church is packed. There's a cake, a choir, real flowers. You sit near the front in your best dress, nodding to the rhythm of joy. And soon after, you become a grandmother. You hold the baby tiny, loud, perfect hand, whisper your mother's name into her ear. The name no one ever let you write down. The name that lived only in memory and song. Now, it lives again. You start writing letters, not because you expect answers, but because you want your story told. You write 2 newspapers, 2 politicians, to anyone who will listen. 1 letter gets printed. You stare at the page for hours. Your words, printed for strangers. Your truth, no longer invisible. And still, you dream. You dream of the bayou, of moss hanging low, of the whispering reeds and the sound of frogs at night. You dream of your mother's voice, of the old woman who hummed to you when the whip cracked too close, of the first star you've ever followed. You dream of the night you buried a pebble by a sycamore tree and waited, and in that dream, someone's waiting for you. You walk down a road that never ends. You pass fields that bloom without pain. You see faces familiar, unaged, eternal. They nod, they smile. They say, you made it. You wake up with a tear on your cheek and sunlight on your bed. Freedom still needs defending. The nation is far from healed. But today, you are free. Tomorrow, you'll be free again. And the next day after that, no matter what laws come or fade, you will always remember what it cost. And you'll make sure your granddaughter remembers too. Because history, after all, isn't something written in stone. It's something passed by hand. And your hands, still strong. You no longer run, but your story does. It travels on foot, on wagons, in whispers and firelight, in sermons and lullabies. It passes between hands like warm bread, spoken aloud in back rooms, printed in pamphlets, etched into memory by people determined never to forget. You're alive in more places than your body could ever reach. Your granddaughter asks for the story again. You sit on the porch with her small head resting on your shoulder, the late sun spilling gold over her curls. She wants the version with the swamp and the star map and the lady called Moses. She always does. And each time you tell it, you add just a little more. A pause here, a glance there, a joke about how bad the biscuits were in that wagon. You tell her how you slept with your shoes on for years, how you stitched scraps of scripture into your coat lining, not because you understood every word, but because someone once said it might keep you safe. You tell her that freedom didn't arrive with a trumpet. It arrived with blisters and doubts, with hunger and starlight, with a name you couldn't say out loud and a song you couldn't stop humming. You don't tell her everything. Some parts belong to the silence, but you give her the truth in pieces she can carry. The world around you is changing again. The Reconstruction years begin. Brief, fragile hope blossoms. Black men vote for the first time, hold office, write laws. There's applause in some places, knives in others. The country is stretching toward something unfamiliar, uneasy. Historians still argue whether Reconstruction was a chance wasted or a seed planted, whether progress was crushed too soon or simply slowed by fear. You've stopped arguing. You've lived long enough to know progress is a stubborn thing. It might stall, or stagger, or hide, but it doesn't forget the road it's taken. You live to see your granddaughter walk into a school built by freed hands, with books stacked neatly on pine shelves, and a teacher who looks just like her. You watch her recite the alphabet with a voice so sure it makes your chest ache. And one day, she draws a picture of you strong, upright, holding a lantern. I told the class, you help people find the way, she says. You laugh. Child, I got lost more than I got found. But you kept going, she says. Yes, you kept going. You plant flowers in your garden now. Not cotton, not cane, not tobacco. Flowers, ones that bloom just because they can. You sit beneath a shady tree with a quilt in your lap and a warm drink in your hand, and for the first time, your life belongs to you. Letters still arrive from old friends, from children you once sheltered, from neighbors who crossed rivers with your map in their shoe. They sign their names and call you mother, auntie, guide. You never asked for titles, but you wear them now like medals. You begin writing a book just for your granddaughter, a slim thing, full of crooked letters and smudges, but it holds everything. The songs, the warnings, the secrets and stitches. You call it the road that carried me. She keeps it under her pillow. Some nights, she reads it aloud to herself, and one morning, she asks, What should I do when people forget? You close your eyes. You feel the breeze in the trees. You hear the past in your breath. You say, remind them, because forgetting is how chains begin again. And remembering, that's freedom's second heartbeat. You've outlived presidents, wars, borders. You've outlived your old name, and the one after that, and the one you chose when you first crossed the line. Now, you are simply you, a survivor, a builder, a road. And, as the sun slips low and the garden hushes for the night, you sing that melody one more time. The one without words. The one that once meant goodbye. Now it means home.